now. You probably could have had your first lie-in 3 years, Matt, so thank you very much for speaking to us this morning. I know you're disappointed about last night, and you sounded a bit disappointed about your silver medal. You also have a gold. How have you reflected at all on your achievements this week if you've had time?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's been an early morning, so no time for reflection just yet. But yeah, look, overall the week's been fantastic. I'm walking away from my second Olympics at 21 years old with my second and third Olympic medals. I've now got 2 golds and a silver at the Olympics, which if you'd have offered me that when I was a little boy, I would have snapped your hand off for it. So yeah, I think it's one of those. It's very easy to be wrapped up in what I believe I could have done this week, and and sort of be disappointed by some of the races that didn't go the way I wanted them to. But overall, I've got to reflect on the positives, and I couldn't have done any of it without my family, my teammates, my coaches. Obviously the support of the National Lottery and everybody back home. So it's been a fantastic week. I'm only young. I'm 21 years old. I'm still going. I want to go for at least another 2, hopefully 3 more Olympics. So yeah, let's just keep going, keep enjoying it, and yeah, hopefully this is just the beginning.
Well, you were part of that first team to successfully defend the Olympic swimming relay title with the same 4 swimmers. That's something that hasn't been done before when you guys retained the 4x200 freestyle title. How special is this team that you're in?
Oh, it's incredible. It is absolutely incredible. I mean, all 4 of us guys in that team now, we've all had individual success on the 200 freestyle at a world or Olympic level. And that's something that I think, is very, very rare in the sporting world, to have 4 people that have all individually, either won or medalled on, multiple occasions at a world level. To be a part of that team, and obviously 3 years ago in Tokyo, being the youngster, my first ever international, come along and join those 3 guys who were already very well decorated, very well respected in the sport and in that event. And over the last 3 years, kind of trying to develop myself and learn from them as best as I can, and now starting to be able to take that role myself as well, and enjoy being a part of that team. It's really special, and I think it's something that it's very rare to see in sport in general. So yeah, it's incredible to be a part of.
Yeah, that, I suppose, disappointment from last night stemmed partly from what Adam Peaty has said. Your 4th place finish in the 100-metre relay. There's no point winning if you're not winning fair, is what Adam Peaty has said. China won that gold medal. 2 of their 4 medalists were amongst those 23 Chinese swimmers who reportedly returned positive doping tests prior to the Tokyo Games. What was your reaction to China winning that gold?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a tough one. I mean, I would like to say I've got faith in the system to come across that your energy with everyone else, and it will break you in half. People listening to this who haven't done sport, it is probably it's very hard to explain how much of a commitment you have to put in every single day, and we're never asking for anyone's sympathy. We have to choose to do it. But whether I want to do that with my children and take a family in the future, that's a decision not for me anymore. That's a decision that the whole family has to make. And I'm not going to worry about tomorrow. I'm not going to worry about LA. I want to really look at these next 2 years, take a rest away from the sport. Maybe, I don't know. I think it hurts like nothing I've ever experienced when you touch the wall and you don't get what you want, because of the variables that is giving you on that day. Unfortunately, we have to wait every 4 years.
And I think, speaking of your family, we talked to your mum on the programme the other day, and I think she's not only hinted, she's pretty much said that she'd like you to have a more normal life than competitive swimming involves, and yet everyone will understand this is who you are. This is what has made you, with all the challenges that go alongside it.
I think so. I've definitely learned so much, and I'm so grateful for who I've become through the sport. But it doesn't define me. I mean, if you asked me this 3 years ago, I'd be very scared. But I am a person away from the sport. I'm very healthy with that, and I know who I am now outside of it. So yeah, I mean, there's so much to look forward to in life that I haven't even experienced because of the sport. It's so demanding. Waking up 6 hours a week, going to bed, waking up again 6 hours a week every single day, 12 hours a week. Plus all the business stuff. So yeah, it's extremely hard to do, and I can't make the decision on my own now.
Can we talk, Adam, about the framework around you in sport? Because when the Chinese won last night, and 2 of the 4 gold medalists there reportedly returned positive doping tests prior to Tokyo, essentially they weren't banned because the Chinese anti-doping agency said that they had unintentionally ingested the substance. What do you think needs to happen? Do you think that the framework surrounding your sport at the Olympics or the international framework is not strong enough?
I really think that it's very hard because it's so complicated with all the individual countries and all their individual anti-doping agencies. The way it works is obviously, UKAD would test me, and then I'll get an international test me
UK
as well.
anti-doping, yeah.
Yeah, but I'd also get an international one from the ITA on behalf of World Athletics. We need more international, and we need to decentralise it. We need to get rid of those governing bodies that are almost a little bit too suspicious, because they're responsible. There's too much trust in those to do due diligence and to do simple things. We've had so much come out of these countries that are more than eyebrow raising. Is that acceptable? No. We just need people to do their job, and I want to make sure this sport is protected in 8 years, 12 years. And are we on the right track at the moment? Absolutely not. So yeah, we just need to be firmer and making sure that it's not as biased as it currently is, because we know we're doing a job, we know we've got the education here, but are they doing it exactly on a Sunday morning, getting tested at 6 a.m. like I am in China? Who knows? Yeah, but these are the questions that all need to be raised and firmly applied, especially after the Olympics.
Adam Peaty, thanks very much for joining us this morning from Paris.
12 minutes to 8 is the time to have a look at the papers and the causes of the riots, the underlying.
Some of them that they attributed to Aesop had come from Libya. So the earliest fable mentioned in Greek with a source specified is in Aeschylus. So this is the first half of the 5th century BCE, and it's in Aeschylus's Myrmidons, or fragments of Aeschylus's Myrmidons. He calls them mythoi hoi libustikoi, so Libyan stories, Libyan myths. And so in the 200 to 300 years after Hesiod, these stories have shifted once again, now maybe from Libya. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome my guests, Edith Hall and Adam Rutherford. Edith, where are these fables? There are different words for them in Greek, aren't there? Mythoi, logoi. Where are they used? Where do we find them? Law courts, symposia, parties? Where?
Oh, pretty much everywhere. In comedies, it's very much a sign of a rather boorish, lower class person without manners that they resort to telling an Aesopic fable at a dinner party where a posh person would sing a nice lyric poem, something like that. So it's the symbolism class element to it. But Aristotle's famous handbook for rhetoric, which is the first surviving book we've got, which tells you how to make a speech, I have to say, it's the most incredible advice it completely holds, is judicious use of stories everybody knows is a very sophisticated way of creating a collective identity in a jury. So these touchstone stories that everybody knows will build up a sort of community. Yeah, exactly. And that's also actually in the tradition of Aesop's own life, is that his kind of wisdom, his stories, would so impress some great ruler that they would then hire him as their court.
Yeah, so we're telling truth to power.
Yes, it is.
Ties it in a sweet animal story, but
Yeah.
actually just quite an important.
Exactly. I think that there's a general sense that at least the sort of stock repertoire of maybe 50 most well known of Aesop's fables, they did grow in number vastly. But you know what? Actual morals we have distilled down to about 10.
Yes.
You just alter the personnel. You could have a vole and a rat, or a frog and a tadpole, or a farmer and Dionysus. But the actual morals, and I'm not talking the morals handed to you, which are often pretty stupid, but the obvious sense of them. And they are either force majeure is okay, so I'm bigger than you, the bigger animal wins, or you've got a tiny little bit of hope if you're smaller, if you're very clever and winning, so things like hares and tortoises, that sort of thing. Or you can try and control the fact that the other guy is more powerful than you by doing a preemptive favour and hoping that they'll be grateful later. I've done this, I've gone through them, and you can come out with a very limited number of commonsensical messages about how to get on in the world. disturbing. Okay, people think they're charming, and they insist on giving all their poor little babies books of Aesop's fables. I mean, it's one of the first books to roll off Caxton's printing press, and the very first children's book actually written deliberately for children in Britain was William Godwin's Aesop in 1805. And he basically said, I wrote this for Mary Godwin, and we all know what happened to Mary Shelley's imagination. All right?
Which was completely fine.
Exactly. So, more copies of Aesop have been sold around the world than any other text, not just classic text, except the Bible. I can quantify that for you, and in more languages than anything other than the Bible. If you like Aesop's fables in childhood, most unusual.
It was a very unusual childhood.
Yeah. Rousseau said, do not let children read these. It will stop them having revolution. A lot of people want to say, hey, we've got underclass and resistance literature. This is slave law. This is them telling the stories of how to deal with the masters. They are all about imbalanced power relations. They just are.
Yes.
Other people have said, no, they're not. They're actually helping to keep everybody down by saying the big raven will always kill a little nightingale. I actually think it's both.
Yeah.
I think that these fitted the ideology of a deeply unequal society and resonated to both sides.
Yeah. What's the difference between these earlier fables from the ancient Near East or from North Africa and Aesop's fables, and how can we know who wrote which? It's an excellent question, and one I would really like to be able to answer. There are more than 350 fables attributed to Aesop today, but the earliest catalogue of fables under Aesop's name was in the 4th century BCE by a man named Demetrius, who was a student of Theophrastus, who was a colleague of Aristotle. Got it? Good. And he ascribed probably fewer than 100 fables to Aesop. So somewhere along the line, if Aesop lived in the 6th century BCE, he gets mentioned by name in the 5th century BCE, so presumably he's before then, if he lived at all. It seems to be the case, from our very contradictory and unreliable sources, that sort of 250 fables get added to his collection of fables after he's died. That's obviously not impossible. You know, they might have found some after he died, or some might have just turned up after he died. And after all, plenty of people who are otherwise reasonably sane genuinely think that the Earl of Oxford wrote quite a lot of Shakespeare after he died. Because the alternative is to believe that a person from the Midlands could make art, and you all know that can't be true. So it's not impossible that fables were found and given to Aesop after his death. A more likely explanation, though, is that animal stories with a joke or a message, maybe a political message or a sort of sting in the tail, were just lumped together as the kind of thing Aesop told. And so the number must be ever expanding. We can even maybe see this happening in a couple of examples. So in Aristophanes' play The Wasps, which is from, did I say 422 BCE? And let's hope it's true. A character asks another to tell us a gag from Aesop, and you can already see how you're going to end up with loads of jokes attributed to him, because there's no sense of them belonging to someone if other people are telling them. In Plato's Phaedo, which is set in 399 BCE, when Socrates is waiting to drink hemlock before being condemned to death, Socrates has a dream in which he's told that he should be making music or poetry, and he should give it a good go. So never wanting to distrust his dreams, because they've got him so far. So wait a minute, let's know this, that's right. Socrates decides he should follow this dream, and he knows he's not a storyteller himself, so he starts putting Aesop fables, animal stories presumably, into verse or into song, because, he says, I knew those already. So we can get a sense immediately from these two texts, which are, at least in their setting, only 20 years or so apart, that some people at least knew Aesop stories just really well, could just quote them from memory, just like we might be able to. And I think probably most of us can quote a few Aesop fables. I thought we'd look at some that we probably already know and some that were less known, at least to me. I definitely remember from my childhood The North Wind and the Sun, The Tortoise and the Hare, and maybe The Frogs Who Want a King. So in The North Wind and the Sun, you may remember this too, there's a competition between the North Wind and the Sun, who are personified of course, to see who can get the clothes off a traveller first. And now I say this, it sounds sort of seedy, doesn't it? Anyway, the North Wind blows really hard. Oh, that's helped. And the man wraps himself even more tightly in his cloak. The sun goes the other way, of course, and shines brightly. The man gets too warm and he takes his cloak off. I don't think my version as a child extended as far as the version does, actually, which is to say that the sun gets even brighter and then he goes skinny dipping, but perhaps that wasn't seen as being appropriate. And of course, the tortoise and the hare, I'm sure you all know, they run a race. The hare is faster than the tortoise, but he's also ridiculous and doesn't try hard. The tortoise gives out. To be honest, I'm slightly afraid of tortoises. I've just seen a very upsetting riot that happened with tortoises. And my friend and I were like, should we separate them? I don't know what to do. And then we literally just ran away. The frogs and their king. The frogs demand a king from Zeus, and he gives them a big piece of wood to be their king. And they are really pleased briefly, and then say he's boring, and they want a new king. So Zeus sends them a water snake and a big Are these fables likely to be Greek in origin? Well, yeah, maybe. Zeus is mentioned in one. The Greeks do personify the north wind and the sun, Helios. Frogs are native to Greece, so are tortoises, as we've established. Still scarred. So they're more likely to be Greek than, for example, the fable of the camel, the elephant, and the ape, I would say. In this fable, less well known, the animals are wrangling over who gets to be king. The camel and the elephant both want the title, but the ape says that the camel can't be king because he isn't angry enough with what there is. I can only suggest, I run past the camels in London Zoo every single day. They really are angry. I don't know how angry you want them to be, but they're peeved constantly. So how is that not enough? Anyway, as far as the ape is concerned, the camel is not cross enough with wrongdoers, and the elephant, of course, is afraid of piglets. Presented as a fact, and of all those animals mentioned, only the piglet is native to Greece. So it seems more likely that this might be a Libyan fable rather than an Aesop one. Adam, you are obviously an expert in evolutionary biology, and therefore my first question to you has to be, who would win in a race between a tortoise and a hare?
Oh, wow, just crack my knuckles and think about that. I mean, this is you may have picked the wrong two guests for this.
No, I picked my absolute two favourite people.
Okay, well, that's because I also hate these stories.
No, you don't.
Mostly because, the last time we sat on the stage together, we were talking about Aristotle.
Yes, we
talking
were.
about this amazing book, Animalia, foreshadowing evolutionary thought, which becomes my subject several thousand years later. And then I also love the classics for things like Diogony and just the mad stories of antiquity. And then with Aesop, you just got neither of those things. You just got really, really bad biology and some hopeless morality thrown in there. Like when I was doing my homework for this recording, I was thinking, this sounds a little bit, I can't quite tell whether this sounds like David Brent giving an instruction to the people in the office, or it's a Backstreet Boys lyric.
But some animals behave characteristically as we would perceive them, right? So foxes generally are quite clever, hares are a bit scary.
Are they?
I don't know, you're the biologist.
We only think these things because of bloody Aesop. Well, this is a terrible circle we're completing here. What is cunning about a fox? If you live in South East,
Fantastic, Mr. Fox.
alright, so it's Aesop and Roald Dahl.
Yeah, okay.
Also have issues with the attribution of human characteristics to animals, which seems to persist, I assume, from Aesop into the present, is just nonsensical. The natural world, apart from humans, is amoral. There's that terrible Tennyson poem that everyone quotes about nature being red and tooth and claw. I mean, it really is a shockingly bad poem, and that's the only really decent line in it. But all of the attributes of the positive associated with these animals are nonsensical and don't exist. And we could talk about dolphins who do
I was
come
going
up
to say,
in Aesop.
there are some really negative ones. So there's a fable with the battle between whales and dolphins, in which both of them come across, frankly, to be quite obnoxious and very aggressive. When a tiny fish says, don't be nice to each other, and they're like, no, we like killing each other. And the moral of that one, don't get ideas above your station, tiny fish. But dolphins are awful. You've told me this before.
Yeah, I have, and it's particularly bottlenose dolphins. I mean, they are the most evil creatures. No, I'm doing it. I'm falling into my own trap. They're not evil. They're just horrible. No, is that? Oh, they're sick. Oh,
They're smiling assassins. You've told me before.
Yeah, they just got a cute face and they're quite intelligent, but they're extraordinarily violent. And so I can imagine that if you were going to pick a side in Wales versus dolphins, that would be a good film.
Right?
I'm definitely on the whale side.
Some of these fables definitely feel like stories or jokes for children, more than others, I would say. So the story of the Ailuros, that's a weasel or maybe a pine marten, it hears about some chickens being sick, and so it disguises itself as a doctor and pays a house call. How are you feeling? It asks solicitously. Great if you go away again, say the chickens. Yeah, that's kind of cute. I said Ailuros, by the way, I gave you the Greek, because when I was a student, this word meant cat. It's a word that's changed, it's an ancient Greek word that's changed its meaning in my lifetime, which I find impossibly pleasing, so you'll have to pretend you do. They haven't found many skeletons. It's always just possible that the cats are messing this around. But anyway, very likely it's not the case that they had cats. So an Ailuros was probably a different animal that the Greeks kept for catching, birds or mice or whatever, so maybe weasels or pine martens or something like that. Even the derivation of the word has changed, its etymology has changed in my lifetime. We used to think an Ailuros meant a wavy-tailed or waggy-tailed creature, because the aisle bit means shimmering and the Ailura bit is the tail, but now we think it means bird.
攞齊嘢，攞4張㗎嘛？
And to be
bottle.
honest, for the purposes
Okay,
of these
bye.
fables, any small predatory animal will usually do. So there's one really nice one with a galah, that's a polecat, a house ferret. This ferret falls for a handsome man, and she prays to Aphrodite, don't mock. The love between ferret and man is a love that dare not speak its name. It doesn't require your judgment. She prays to Aphrodite to be turned into a young woman, and Aphrodite grants her wish. So the couple get it on, and then Aphrodite wants to know if a ferret can truly change its ways. So she releases a mouse in front of the woman, who chases it. And Aphrodite turns her back into a ferret, I'm afraid. The moral of this story is given that bad people can change their appearance but not their nature, which is a bit judgy, but of course we would say a leopard can't change its spots, so it's sort of similar. The morals of these fables, by the way, were usually attached to them much later by different writers. So some betray much later kinds of moral thought, others are just plain bad, I'm not going to lie to you, or meaningless. So, for example, the neighbouring frogs. One frog lives in a big pool, quite a long way from the cart's track, and another frog lives in a small stagnant pool right on the cart's track. And the first frog says to the second frog, why don't you come and live by me? And the second frog says, I really like my neighbourhood, I like it here, I think I'll stay. And just as she finishes the word stay, she gets crushed by a chariot wheel. And the moral given is that lowly tradespeople will die before getting a better job. How is that the moral? How is the moral not first frog is always right? I can't tell you, but anyway, there we are. These fables are incredibly influential. They have an incredibly wide reach today in our culture. So, for example, my favourite songs. You can look at me blankly if you want, but I don't care. It's changed our language too. The fox who sees a bunch of grapes. He's a hungry fox, and the grapes are just too high for him. Can't reach, and so he dismisses them as omphaches, unripe, or as we might say, sour grapes. That's where it comes from. Not impressed by our Wilson. My favourite fable changes, obviously, but today it is the story of the bat, the bramble, and the gull. The bat, the bramble, and the gull plan to meet and do some trading. The gull has copper. The bramble has cloth. I don't know where he got it. The bat has to borrow money because he wants to get in on the deal. But the ship carrying the copper and the fabric is wrecked in a storm, and that is why you always see the gull on the shore looking for his copper to see if he's been washed in on the tide. It's why a bramble grabs at your clothes when you go past to see if it's made of his stolen cloth. And that's why bats only fly in the dark, because he's on the run from his creditors. So you see, these fables are fun and popular, and the Greeks loved to create stories around stories. So, in the early 5th century BC, Herodotus, the sort of historian and anthropologist, tells us that Aesop was pals with the celebrity courtesan Rhodopis, who he identifies as a Thracian woman named Dorica, freed, this is all in book 2 of Herodotus, by the brother of the lyric poet Sappho. Dorica and Aesop the story maker, that's the word in Greek, logopoios, isn't that gorgeous? Were slaves, Herodotus says, to a man named Iadmon on the island of Samos. There is, I should tell you, literally no evidence that any of this is true. You should always be suspicious when famous ancient people know each other in a story. So Adam, I'm going to try and sell you the story of the gull and the bat and the bramble and reciprocity. Animals do favours for each other in some ways, don't they?
Well,
Or trade.
that is absolutely true.
Yep.
In that they just tick and move on.
I'm not taking it. Just made it for tick. Tick. Bonus fact for people in the room. It literally says animal trading plus reciprocity. Tick. Penguin sex.
There's lots of mutualism and symbiosis in nature. It's how the networks of life continue to exist. The penguin sex thing is a really interesting example of transactional relations in nature. It's just Adelie penguins again, so. Female Adelie penguins really like shiny pebbles. The best nests are made with the shiniest pebbles. And sometimes they can't get a hold of the shiniest pebbles. And sometimes the young males have shiny pebbles. So sometimes female Adelie penguins give up their most precious asset in exchange for a shiny pebble. What's Aesop's story about that then?
Adam, given how much we've lowered the tone, I am loath to ask you the following question, but I did promise I would. Could you tell us about the boy and the swallow?
I'm going to kill all the sexual innuendo dead because this is the only one that I really like, The Boy and the Swallow, and it's associated with the phrase, the first swallow of spring. The tale of the young man who sees the first swallow of spring, so he assumes spring is coming. So he takes his coat off and then he burns it. Now, I have a slight issue with why you would do that. He gets rid of his coat completely rather than just hanging it up. And then it isn't spring at all, and what follows is a lot of cold weather and he dies of exposure. So the moral of that story is never look to statistical outliers, especially on a Gaussian distribution, in order to understand the mean. And that is a really, really good moral.
So Herodotus is probably both borrowing from and adding to a tradition which is given a fuller treatment in a text called The Life of Aesop, or sometimes the Aesop Romance, which should give you an idea of its plausibility. It's an amazing sort of quasi-biographical novella. It's fantastical and comic and picaresque. It shows Aesop as a mute and ugly slave who is given a voice when he shares food with a priestess of the goddess Isis. So here's a connection to Egypt, where, again, some of Aesop's fables probably originated. Some of them have scarab beetles in them, for example. We see Aesop being bought and sold, but always outwitting the people around him, including a philosopher, the philosopher's students, and also his wife. Aesop tells fables with important political messages. He becomes an international celebrity, but he forgets the god Apollo when he thanks other deities, namely the Muses, for his success. Apollo is not a god to take this kind of slight lying down, so he frames Aesop for the theft of a sacred cup. This is honestly all in the Aesop Romance. The Delphians, of course we're in Delphi, that's where Apollo's oracle is featured, decide to throw Aesop over a cliff, because that's what you do when someone's stolen cup, apparently. This is a moment which depicts the pharmakos rite, that's the ritual of killing a scapegoat in order to keep the community cohesive and, minus someone they've turned against. Aesop dies, unsurprisingly, and the Delphians eventually have to pay recompense for his wrongful death. It is a wildly novelistic and unlikely story, and there's no evidence for any of this either before you get too sad. Don't worry, you probably didn't like it, so not the first time you Delphians. I mean, he's dead anyway, but The strange story, I think, tells us something really important, though, which is that Aesop was, in antiquity, as he is now, a celebrity storyteller. Did he write his fables? Did he just say witty things about animals that other people wrote down? Did he even exist? I don't know. But I do know that this enthusiasm for finding stories from all across the ancient world, from the ancient Near East, from North Africa, and centering them in Greece, shows us something really important, which is that the ancient Greeks knew they needed to hear stories from voices other than their own. Natalie Haynes stands up for the classics was written and performed by me, Natalie Haynes. My guests were Professor Edith Hall and Dr. Adam Rutherford, and our producer was the majestic Rosemary Ward Lowry.
Next week, Natalie is joined by Dan Snow to talk Tacitus. After the news, the play that's arrived in London starring 4 leading women, all over the age of 70.
Your love letter to the Paris Olympics.
Come on, Team GB!
Their strength just blows me away.
It's glorious gold once again!
And now you're here, the best that you can be. Just know the nation is so proud of fabulous Team GB.
Absolute legend! Where did he get this from?
Witness a love like no other.
What a fabulous performance on a night of thrilling drama.
The Paris Olympics.
Watch on iPlayer, listen on BBC Sounds.
BBC News has 10 o'clock. The Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly has said the government should have been quicker in its response to riots taking place in UK towns and cities over the weekend. The emergency Cobra meeting is about to start, where ministers, civil servants, police and intelligence officers are gathering to discuss the crisis. Mr. Cleverly said there were important decisions that needed to be made to support police officers.
The fact that most of yesterday we were still not sure whether the Prime Minister would or would not be going on holiday, I don't think sends a good signal. I think that Cobra should have been convened much earlier than today. There are important operational decisions about the nature of mutual aid, funding of overtime, the use of powers, the clarity in leadership at a political level to support our police officers.
Stock markets across Europe and Asia have plummeted in response to concerns about the economy in the US, where employment data last week was worse than expected. Japan's stock market has recorded one of the worst days in its history, while in London, the 100-share index fell by over 2% on opening. The university's admissions organisation, UCAS, says that it could be easier for students to get a place this year because the proportion of 18-year-olds applying is down again. There will also be more places available through clearing for students who don't do as well in their A-levels as they hoped. A new report from the Federation of Small Businesses has found that 70% of small high-street shops say they're at risk of closing. The business group says poor transport links, badly managed parking, and a lack of modern toilet facilities have kept customers away. At the Olympics in Paris, Team GB had to settle for bronze in the mixed relay triathlon after they were originally awarded the silver. After a photo finish, officials gave the US second place behind Germany. And the former England cricketer and coach Graham Thorpe has died at the age of 55. The England and Wales Cricket Board said he was a beloved member of the cricket family. BBC News.
Did you hear the one about the vegan fire breather who became a dairy farmer? Meeting him after 11 o'clock here on Radio 4. First though, it's our first date of the week with Lula McGovern for Woman's Hour.
Hello and welcome to Women's Hour. I know it has been a difficult weekend for many. We are going to discuss the riots and the anti-immigration protests in just a moment. I would like to hear from you, particularly if you're from one of the towns or cities that has been directly affected. How are you feeling about it all? You can text the programme. That number is 84844. On social media, we're at BBC Women's Hour, or you can email us through our website. For a WhatsApp message or a voice note, that number is 03700 100 444. Also today, veteran actors Mary-Lou Henner of Taxi fame and Caroline Aaron, you may know her as Shirley Maisel, the marvellous mother-in-law in The Marvellous Mrs. Maisel. They're both starring, the number 2 women, in Mad Women of the West. It's this rollicking play about issues faced at a later stage of life. Looking forward to speaking to them. And get ready for some self-care rituals. We're going to speak about South Asian Beauty. It's a new book that wants to celebrate a community that the author, Sonia Harrier, says is often misrepresented. Plus, Saturday marked 10 years since the Islamic State group entered Iraq's Sinjar province, displacing, killing and enslaving hundreds of thousands of Yazidis. We're going to hear what the situation for Yazidi women is like right now. But let me begin with the unrest that has continued in several towns and cities across the UK this weekend, with police condemning a staggering level of violence, as they called it. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has condemned far-right thuggery on UK streets and says those involved will regret it. Downing Street is expected to hold an emergency response meeting called COBRA today, as after more than 150 people have been arrested in relation to disorders since
That's someone else. Robert Astor, probably.
Anyway, I want to say we are very excited to see this first club issue of Who Would Battle Back.
It's an honor to be here, Joe.
Robert, viens m'expliquer la situation. À demain, monsieur Riordan.
Complaining about all, yes please.
Well, I thought that was the kind world. Sunday, as Carol Morton said on the front cover of the Gap in
Perhaps it could be something that on the clock today.
I think we talked a bit about the tragic disappearance of the Sydney TV fair, along with Bryce's Neil about.
Do you think perhaps a word of praise for French new writing might be more dignified?
Have you read any English news items, you?
I skimmed a piece in Saturday's Telegraph saying that Montélimar is the new God capital of France. Not sure that's quite edgy enough for French.
I happily moved here from England to escape the English property program technically through France.
Well, there are some dirt cheap places in the Charente. I saw it on Healthy Water Village.
That's quite new. Which channel is that? I could approach them with help. I used to be a novelist. How'd you buy these things?
10,000 for a derelict farm.
Possible. All goes well tomorrow, I might be able to share literature somewhere. Higher education is one big great trend. Might get stretched to a good yard.
Where's the property plans until after Cockerell? Let it see your meeting.
Merci. Good. Please. There, keep change. Buy yourself a watermill or something.
Et nous reviendrons pour parler avec l'auteur célèbre Ed Riordan après cette heure. Okay. Ed, would you like to run me your name?
Yes, right. conducted by BBC Clock. Jazz hijacked the event after the 7th day of solar system travel, talking about audience in highlights of Earth, such as the horror film 919 Valentine, striking the inacceptable possibility of vampires and other belongings, freaky demons who strung up on caves. Then was his homage to PB Women's Olympic swimming trial, and Babes in the Pool, featuring at least one actress of Hobby Kim. Its excellent sequel, Pool Dudes.
My pitch to Sophie was very simple. The police arrived in their maintenance truck, but here's the twist. They're all babes.
But can I take you back to the stuff with them, yeah? And the field still extremely good. C'est d'amour,
Excuse me, but I thought you were supposed to be talking about my novel. Check. Concentrate on that now for a second. You put it aside. Sit down over there with your girlfriend. It's not going to work anyway. All right. You want to take this outside for a day? For a third rate. Right.
ça c'est très culturel. Alors, on peut vivre.
Where the hell's Pete Hilton? Should be up to the boss here by now. I have to say, this is way where Bacon's first house was successful.
Trying to create diversion.
I think the right to swim free of the Bristol gods seems to shut everyone up. One of the recipes of masters of the gods. Backed up in a French jail. Yeah, you took your time, Pete. Very wrong. Any incidents of the spirit of a French capture.
Stopped medication doctor, Season 4, as a jail however, the lovely dropped on researcher.
No, they should.
So how did you manage that thing? Oh, Bridget Macpom's Granny's au pair in the 60s, so I made a few reviews about it. Granny said if you speak to them firmly, they usually do as they're told, and she was right.
Well, now you can make another call, Pete. Get me a cab to the Georges Cinq. That's where you're staying, is it? I might have guessed. And in another week, they'll recover from this. You know what, Jazz? I think we'll come with you. Better book a limo, Pete.
Oh, this is all extremely comfortable, isn't it?
I'm not sure I'd want to be paying £3 grand a night for it.
Oh, that you still get Lipton's tea bags. Are we going out for dinner?
Oh, you said it, I think.
Good. Then settle down to watch ourselves and pop you in.
It might be on there if I'm getting a bit lonely.
So what did you actually say to Jazz in the back of the limo? I noticed that it's a new world came out.
It's the news there.
Ed, what did you say?
About what? Oh, yes, I told Jazz I was only 17 when he coerced me to appear naked in the opening sequence. I said I was 2 months underage.
And were you?
No. But the threat of lawsuit was enough to terrify me, putting our room food on the very garden street. Ah, here we are. Oh, they're not showing the interview. Ah, there I am. Look.
Where?
I'm about to serve. What girl would want him for a husband?
You with all that hair, surely. Oh, gosh. Yes, it is you.
Edwin, starring Christopher Douglas, Rachel Atkins, Sally Grace, Dylan Greenwood, Philip Jackson, Lauren O'Shaughnessy, Nicholas Armisen, Helen Thomas, and Jeffrey Whitehead. It was written by Christopher Douglas. The producer was Dawn Ellis, and it was a BBC Studios production.
And next week, Ed rediscovers the pub quiz. Next this afternoon on Radio 4, shocking revelations in an Essex village gripped by chess.
If you look through your makeup bag, chances are you might have a blusher, eyeshadow or face powder that contains the ingredient talc. but there are questions about its safety. Women diagnosed with cancer have launched court cases against cosmetics companies. They claim that there is something lurking in the town. Asbestos. I'm Phoebe Keane, and in a new series on how they made us doubt everything, I'll explore the story of Talc. How They Made Us Doubt Everything, Series 2 of Talc Tales. This Monday to Friday at 1:45 on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
Now on Radio 4, Adrian Scarborough concludes Emmy Williams' Gambit, set in the village of Little Purlington, where strange acts of misrule have been afoot all year. Today, in the score sheet, as local Prodigy Betty prepares to play a Grand Master up in London, the human chess pieces on the village green stand ready to echo his every move.
The chess pieces were throwing punches, all seemingly aimed at one figure on the village green. A fight was never the intended outcome in chess, staged that chilly afternoon in Ireland. It all happened very quickly, and before the game was even properly underway. Just seconds before, all had been quiet, convivial, both between the players and the spectators. Of course, there was something distinctly nocturnal about the player pieces as they began piling into their places across the green. Their green-paper costumes only added to a strange, rough and ready presentation. In their tattered robes and capes, the cast chess pieces looked like they had already taken battle. Despite this, however, there was an agreement that the game should still take place. The other arrangements for the day's festivities were already set in motion, after all. The chess-themed black and white Battenberg cakes had been baked. The school band had been practicing their arrangement of Arthur Bliss's Chickweed ballet score, and the last of the year's budget had been spent on hiring an 8-metre by 4-metre outside broadcast screen. It would indeed be a shame for all this to go to waste. Many of the chess pieces, bored of standing on their marks for so long and waiting for the game to kick off, had been stamping their feet and blowing on their cupped fingers. 2 opposing lines of 16 players standing shoulder to shoulder and double-ranked on the makeshift chessboard. Others swapped snatches of small talk. No one could have known this calm would soon become a blur of raised fists, wild eyes, and mouths wide open with war cries. Dressed in their homemade costumes, Lorna and Mary stood next to one another in the centre of the chessboard. 2 pawns in their starting positions, holding lovely weather. She got her eyes ahead of the pieces of the other. Perhaps the 2 couples were nothing, very quiet smile. How do you feel, Lorna? Like, in a way that could be left as a joke or taken up as a marker. While they remained in their separate squares, the 2 pawns' shoulders touched. Meanwhile, further down, standing at the end of the nearest big screen, Dr. Gilligan could be spotted with his shoulders. Although the curate wore the same costume as the other white pawns, he showed none of his fellow pieces quiet excitement for the game to begin. He kept casting grim looks over at his fellow players, a mix of disgust and resentment. Anyone paying close attention might even have described his look as a sneer. Catching sight of the curate's expression, a nearby villager dressed as a white horse-headed knight said jovially, "Cheer up, Red, might never happen." Rather than returning the quip, however, the curate fixed the knight and scowled until the latter pivoted away and pretended to attend to some detail of his reins. Dr. Gilligan glanced again at the written chessboard, as if predicting how best to escape. His eyes fell on the 2 players in the roles of king and queen, and he almost growled. The curate would never say it out loud, but to not be in full control, to not be calling shots, or to hold the highest esteem, Or wasn't just wounded pride he felt. Dr. Gilligan found it almost unbearable, an insult to his intelligence and ambition, and he felt an already deep-seated resentment for the people of Little Purlington rise in his throat like bile or anger, or like a howl. The big screen beyond the chess pieces had sprung into life, and there was a whoop of recognition from the gaggle of spectators. The living chess set were poised to reenact Matthew's moves in real time on the village green. And there he was, on the screen. A close-up of a 12-year-old boy's face, sitting by a chessboard in what looked like a fancy wood-panelled restaurant. It was not a particularly flattering shot of Matthew, because briefly the moving image had been interrupted. Technology failed to keep up with the live broadcast. In this still glitch of a captured moment, Matthew was caught on screen mid-sentence, brow furrowed, peering directly down the camera. Members of Matthew's game with a child. Matthew nodded, and the Grandmaster went on, drawing closer. I say, let it all out. We chess players can be so much in our own heads, don't you think? Some things are more important than others. He sat back and gave Matthew a smile that spoke of comradeship, of a champion recognizing a peer, happy to let their board mate take whatever space they need.
咁好玩啊，哥哥。
Matthew stood himself. Well, for one, my dad's been having an affair. My mum doesn't seem that bothered though, so maybe it's not all bad. His father could suddenly hear coughing off camera, as if having a choking fit. The watching chess pieces of Little Purlington could hear him quite clearly through the speakers. Matthew went on. But in terms of the village, I have evidence. Here, he pulled something from his pocket and placed it quietly on the board. It was a box of matches. Some of its contents spilled out in funny angles against the straight lines of the checkered board, skidding across the polished wood. I know who is behind all the trouble, he said, and he cleared his throat, ready to make his move. And just as he spoke a name, familiar to many watching back at home in Little Purlington, Matthew's face froze on the big screen and the audio suddenly cut out. The living chess players all stared at one another, willing the big screen to stop glitching, for the audio to return to hear the name. They held their breath. And it is in that moment that Sylvie, who had been watching the live broadcast on her phone rather than relying on the glitching big screen, filled her lungs and shouted a name so loudly that the whole village could hear. Dr. Gilligan's head snapped around, his mouth open in an O of shock. He began specifying his apologies, his remonstrations, his anger, but it was too late. After a beat, as the village took it all in, wearing their stained and ragged livery and regalia, with Matthew's stilted image frozen on the screen above their heads, the living chess set surged towards their rogue piece, and seized them by the collar.
Adrian Scarborough is reading the score sheet. Final episode of Gambits by Ellie Williams, produced at 13 Village. After the news, Miriam Margulies on Great Lines.
Earlier this year, a group of teenagers gave up their smartphones.
No, I can't cope with it. It's like having like a comfort item.
Now it's the adults' turn. Did they cope any better?
I'm lying in bed. I won't pick up the book, I'll pick up the pages. It just seems a bit easier.
Oh, my parents got what it's like about mobile phones, and they just say that you get lost a lot and you want to go out. I don't think it was very easy for them. Living without our smartphones, the adults' turn. With me, Rachel Burns.
It's just been a pain, it's been a struggle, I think. Everything's an inconvenience.
On Radio 4 and BBC Sounds. Available now. BBC News at 3 o'clock. Sir Keir Starmer has said that a standing army of specialist police officers is ready to be deployed to crack down on what he called the mindless thuggery which has broken out across England and Northern Ireland. Rioters have targeted mosques and hotels housing asylum seekers after social media posts falsely claimed that a migrant was responsible for the fatal stabbings of 3 girls in Southport. Speaking after an emergency meeting, Sir Keir insisted that the law applied both online and offline. The senior Liberal Democrat MP Layla Moran said her party was broadly supportive of the Prime Minister's approach.
We agree that these are measures that they should be looking at. I was very heartened to hear him recognise that, notwithstanding the physical manifestation of these riots, that there is a social media element to this. So he did mention that. What I was hoping to hear a bit more of is how he is going to call in the social media giants, what resourcing and extra resourcing they're going to put in behind it.
Wall Street's main indexes plunged upon opening as fears that the United States could tip into a recession rippled through the global financial markets. The Dow Jones dropped by more than 1,000 points, about 2.7%. Analysts say it's a reaction to US employment data, which was worse than expected. The Prime Minister of Bangladesh has resigned and fled the country. In recent weeks, thousands of anti-government protesters have been killed in clashes with police, as Sheikh Hasina faced calls to resign. Team GB have won bronze in the triathlon mixed relay at the Paris Olympics, after initially being awarded silver. Alex Lee, Georgia Taylor-Brown, Sam Dickinson and Beth Potter were downgraded after a review of the photo finish. It put the United States in second place, with Germany taking gold. Elsewhere at the Games, there's been disappointment for Great Britain's Molly Caudry. She'd been the best pole vaulter this year, but crashed out of the qualification session after failing to clear the bar. BBC News.
How far would you go to build the perfect body shape? Half an hour to explore the world of this thinking, experimentation, made it the glamorous surface of life in the 1980s LA gym scene. A series of muscle men. That's after the return of our biography series here on Radio 4, Great Bars.
Today's guest is someone we've been pursuing for a very long time. Miriam Margolyes, award-winning actor, writer, chat show terror. Miriam, welcome to Great Bars. Who would you pick to be one?
Thank you for a lovely introduction. I picked Charles Dickens because he's the man in my life.
Why?
I love him because he's tugged me into his world and never let me go. I love him because he writes better prose than anyone who ever lived. Because he's told the most interesting stories, invented 2,000 of the best characters, and because he's a wicked man.
It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Wasn't he a great phrase maker?
Oh, totally.
Yes.
I think he's done more for us than Shakespeare.
Oh my goodness.
Lay my cards on the table there. And his joy was so wonderful. He would go to the mirror and do the bits and watch himself and really have fun.
Who's your favourite character in Dickens?
I think I have to say there are two. I can't decide. One is Mrs. Duff. She is the wonderful midwife that Martin Chuzzlewit, who said, I takes it regular and I rolls it low. She's delicious. And the other is Miss Hamilton.
Yes. You've toured the world talking about Dickens. You've written a book. You've talked to school children. I've been watching a documentary of you talking to school children in New Zealand.
Oh, I forgot.
Well, you did. You went all the way to New Zealand.
Was I any good? Did I
Oh, you were brilliant. Let's hear a quick clip of you talking about Dickens to a large hall of school children in New Zealand back in 2012.
Guess how many characters he created? Show me a number. Okay, up on that. 150? Who's that a million? Stand up, please. Stand up, please. You knew it couldn't be a million, didn't you? That was a little tease for me. I will tell you how many. 2,000.
I noticed, Miriam, at the end of your description of the reasons why you loved Dickens, you used the word wicked, that he was a wicked man. Now, is it the man You admire all the work?
I'd have to say no.
Yes.
You can't divide him from what he did. What he wrote was extraordinary, astonishing, thrilling, funny, truthful. But what he did, how he lived his life, he showed himself to be capable of great good. That has to be acknowledged. It doesn't make me happy to say, but it made him even more fascinating. To think that he knew what good and evil was, absolutely, but in his life he behaved badly.
Interesting. I was talking to A.M. Wilson the other day, who took a very purist view that a creative genius was to be examined only on their work and not on their life, and their life is irrelevant. Isn't irrelevant?
How absurd of A.M. Wilson to say that. It's really a smack. I mean, you can't disassociate the man from the work. You can admire one thing and be furious about the other. He was also a very good man. He was aware of poverty and wanted to change it. But the way he treated his wife, we cannot let that pass. It has to be acknowledged.
I want to come on to that, and luckily we're joined here in the studio by Professor Catherine Hughes, author of Victorians Undone. Catherine, I think you've said your favourite book is Bleak House, which he wrote at the perfect hinge of his career. I'm quoting from you here. All the usual fun is here, you said, but it's in the service of a sustained moral inquiry into the evil that man-made systems do to the people they're supposed to help. Remind us very quickly what was going on in Bleak House.
Well, Bleak House is this extraordinarily wide-ranging book. It's like he's thrown a web of words around English society. So at the centre is this obfuscating, elitist establishment that really exists to serve itself. And from there, sort of emanates a kind of contagion which seeps out and brings in everybody from the very poor, Joe to the very grand, with Lady Dedlock, who lives in splendid parsonage in Lincolnshire. And they're brought together through this very mysterious lawsuit with Jarndyce versus Jarndyce, which we never really know what it's about. But it has an extraordinary ability to draw in with unlikely people, and that gives this huge canvas.
I love the idea of a huge canvas and the web of people of all walks of life.
It's the state of the nation who analyses the world that existed then, and honestly, we have to say, exists now.
I think so. I mean, I think that it just seems incredibly timely. Something like the post office scandal. Well, it's sort of there in Bleak House.
Let's start with the basics. He was born in 1812, 2nd of 8 July.
Exactly. Not well off, and I think very aspiring. I've always felt that to be born into the lower middle class was the absolute worst fate we could have. But somewhere along the line, his imagination was stimulated, and probably by his nurse, I think, who told him scary stories and scared the daylight out of him.
But it's very early on. He seems to be quite happy. As Miriam said, he's born with a great imagination. So the actual event, right from the start, he loves putting on shows with his elder sister, Fanny. He's so good at it that his father, John Dickens, who is a vicar, actually takes the two children to the local pub and puts on shows. And people think these children are just extraordinary. There's something really, really kind of otherworldly about them, and that's the precocious talent. And their performance, and he was a performer. I think people are divided into audience and performance, and we all know which one we are. And
you and I do anyway.
I think we do. And he was a performer. And it's interesting because he said in midlife, I was an odd child, and I think I became an odd man.
I think he was somebody who hid. He hid in his characters. He doesn't want you to know him, but he enjoys taking on different guises. And he knows that he's probably got a little smile on his face. And that's, for example, why he often mentions Blackie. Because when he was taken away from school to earn money because the rest of the family were in the Marshalsea prison, nobody gets...
Which we'll come to.
Yes, I know, I'm jumping a bit. But every now and again you get the mention of Blackie. And I know that that's
Yes.
him saying, what it is, but nobody will know, nobody will know.
Time very quickly to introduce a new voice that listeners may recognise. Play the tape.
In Chasm in Kent, where he grew up, he was remembered as an active, alert, eager, child. Hysterical, perhaps, oversensitive, certainly, but decidedly. I looked at nothing to find more, but I saw.
How wonderful to have
Yes.
Simon
Yes.
to read, because he's one of, next